The room was still celebrating when the CEO turned to the man who had just saved the company millions and calmly told him he was fired. Nobody laughed. Nobody moved. The single father stood beside the conference table, his hands still trembling from the exhaustion of the biggest deal of his career, while the executives around him stared at the floor. He had spent 11 months winning that contract, countless nights working after putting his little daughter to sleep, and more than one morning arriving at the office with coffee in one hand and a child's drawing tucked inside his briefcase. Yet in less than 30 seconds, everything he had built seemed to disappear. Daniel Carter had never expected life to be easy. 5 years earlier, he had become a single father to his 8-year-old daughter, Emma, after losing the person he loved most. From that day forward, every decision he made had one purpose: giving Emma a safe and happy childhood. He worked at Sterling Global, a powerful investment company where people valued profits more than people. Daniel wasn't the loudest executive or the most polished man in the building. He wore the same dark suits until the cuffs began to fade, drove an old car that sometimes refused to start, and kept a tiny photograph of Emma inside his wallet. But what he lacked in wealth, he made up for in determination. When Sterling Global began pursuing a massive international contract, Daniel was given the account almost as an afterthought. The client had rejected 3 senior executives before Daniel stepped into the room. Instead of giving them another polished presentation, he listened. He learned what the client actually needed, rebuilt the proposal from the ground up, and spent months solving problems nobody else wanted to touch. The night before the final meeting, Emma found him asleep at the kitchen table with spreadsheets surrounding him. She quietly placed her favorite stuffed rabbit beside his laptop and whispered that he was the strongest dad in the world. Daniel woke up smiling, and the next morning he closed the deal. The contract was worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and Sterling Global's board erupted in celebration. Executives shook Daniel's hand, cameras flashed, and champagne filled the glasses. But Daniel barely noticed. His first thought was Emma. He wanted to get home before she went to sleep so he could tell her that all their sacrifices had finally meant something. Then, just as he was about to leave the conference room, the CEO, Victoria Hayes, stepped forward. Her expression was cold. She told Daniel that the company was undergoing restructuring and his position was no longer necessary. The word struck harder than any insult. Daniel thought she was joking. She wasn't. If you believe kindness, hard work, and second chances still matter, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Sometimes one small act of kindness wave can remind someone that the world hasn't forgotten them. Daniel slowly placed his company badge on the table. His biggest achievement had become his final day at the company. What he didn't know was that the chairman, Richard Sterling, had been watching everything from outside the room. Richard was the founder of Sterling Global and had been away for months recovering from surgery. He had returned to the building unexpectedly that morning. More importantly, he had personally asked Daniel to handle the contract because he remembered something about the young employee that nobody else seemed to notice. As Daniel walked toward the elevator, Richard entered the conference room. The laughter disappeared instantly. He looked at the contract, then at the executives, and finally at Victoria. He asked who had authorized Daniel's termination. Victoria confidently explained that Daniel was no longer needed now that the deal was complete. Richard's face hardened. He asked her a simple question: who had created the deal in the first place? Nobody answered. Then Richard revealed something that changed the entire room. During his absence, he had secretly reviewed the negotiations. Daniel hadn't simply signed the contract. He had discovered a hidden financial risk that could have cost the company millions and had personally redesigned the agreement to protect Sterling Global. The client had specifically praised Daniel's honesty and leadership. Without him, the deal might never have happened. Richard then opened a second file. It contained Daniel's employment records, performance reviews, and dozens of anonymous complaints from employees who claimed Victoria had been taking credit for their work. the chairman finally understood why talented people kept leaving. Victoria hadn't been protecting the company. She had been protecting her position. But the most powerful moment came when Richard asked Daniel to return to the room. Daniel entered quietly, expecting another humiliation. Instead, Richard walked toward him and offered his hand. He told Daniel that Sterling Global didn't deserve someone like him if it couldn't recognize his value. Then he offered him a promotion to Director of Strategic Partnerships, with authority to build his own team and a salary that would finally allow him to stop worrying about whether he could afford Emma's school tuition. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. He didn't celebrate immediately. He simply asked if the position would require him to spend every night at the office. Richard smiled and told him no company was worth missing his daughter's childhood. For the first time in years, Daniel felt something he had almost forgotten: relief. He went home that evening and found Emma sitting at the kitchen table waiting for him. She asked whether he had lost his job. Daniel sat beside her and told her that sometimes losing one door is how you discover another one was waiting to open. Months later, Daniel became one of the most respected leaders in the company. He introduced flexible schedules for parents, created mentorship programs for younger employees, and made one rule clear to everyone on his team: nobody should have to choose between being successful and being present for the people they love. Victoria was removed from her position after an internal investigation, while Richard remained chairman and watched Daniel transform the company from the inside. One evening, Daniel returned home to find Emma holding a small handmade card. On the front, she had written, "For the best dad in the world." Daniel opened it and found a simple message inside: "I'm proud of you because you never gave up." He hugged her tightly, and for a moment, all the long nights, unpaid bills, disappointments, and painful memories seemed worth it. He finally understood that his greatest deal had never been the contract worth hundreds of millions. It had been proving to his daughter that doing the right thing still mattered, even when nobody was watching. And if this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe for more stories about courage, kindness, and second chances. Before you leave, comment, "Never give up," if you believe that hard work and a good heart will eventually find their reward. Because sometimes, the person being pushed out of the room isn't the one who has lost everything. Sometimes, they are simply being pushed toward the door that was meant for them all along.